Hey guys, are you here? And today we are doing the official Dragonflight tier list. Now, I did do a tier list a couple weeks ago, but a lot of you guys in the comments called me out saying, Czar, you have not played enough Dragonflight, you seem kind of unsure with your choices, and this seems a bit wonky. And you know what? You guys were right. After playing 500 plus games of Arena, I feel like I now have a better idea of what is actually really good and what is actually not that good. So we're gonna redo this thing. Thanks for calling me out, by the way. I appreciate that. Let me do a quick asterisk before hopping into the video. One, if you're watching this video to decide what class you're playing, keep in mind that things get buffed and nerfed all the time. So if you're going with like an S tier class, you know, a month down the road, it could get nerfed. On the other end of the spectrum, if you're playing like a D tier class, it could also get buffed. So keep that in mind. The second thing I want to say is this is a general tier list, meaning that a class might be really good in RBGs, but not so good in 1v1s, or it might be really good in 1v1s and not so good in 3v3. But instead, I'm just going to do general strength of the class, how well you can fare in PvP, meaning I might have a slight bias towards 3v3 arena because that's where you get rank 1 titles, that's the competitive mode for AWC, etc. So a slight bias towards 3v3, but just general strength of the class. And then the final note before we begin is I do want to say that I truly believe that you're going to do better on a class that you enjoy than even if it's performing poorly in the metagame, than a class that you really hate that is doing very well. For example, if you love Fire Mage, but Fire Mage isn't doing that well, and you absolutely hate Demo Locks, but Demo Locks are really performing highly, then you might still do better on your Fire Mage, so keep that in mind. Without further ado, let's hop into it. Tier list for all the specs. Now, I'm not going to rate any of the tank specs because I don't believe tank should play in arena. All right, and if you're a tank and that pisses you off, well, I'm sorry. I truly don't believe tanks should be playing in the arena. Having said that, I think a lot of them are weak anyway, which is good, I think. So we're looking at DPS specs and healer specs. Now, we have S tier being the top, D tier being the bottom. I think Shadow Priest, this should not be a surprise up in the S tier. They're doing so much damage. They have great utility. They can save their partners with shields, with swap, with grips, etc. But they just do so much damage. On top of that, they have void volley, stun, silence, so much control. So, well, there's that. We have Sub Rogue, which I think was S tier, but got nerfed once or twice. I would call it A or B tier. Let's call it B tier for now. Sub does very well in 1v1s, 2v2s, a little bit weaker in 3s because they don't have the sustained damage of some other classes. Arcane Mage, I'd put in S or A tier. Maybe A, maybe A. It could be somewhere in the middle, really. I'll put it in A for now, just because S tier classes to me have like an extra leg up, and A tier still really good, but just not quite there. If we separated this differently, we could do S and S plus tier, but let's just call it A for now. Arcane, great mobility, great burst, great CC, good class, right? It has a bit of strengths over the other mage specs because of that 50% movement speed from Chrono Shift, so Arcane's gonna be able to mobilize itself around the arena quite well. Now, we're gonna put Fire down in C tier. Now, I don't think Fire is like a terrible spec by any means. It's just there's specs that are stronger than it relatively. Fire feels pretty nice. I play a lot of Fire myself. I love Fire. It's probably my personal favorite mage spec, but if I'm gonna rank it, emotions aside, I don't think it's as strong of a class. Less mobility, you're actually less tanky. If you guys didn't know, Blazing Barrier is still nerfed from Shadowlands. With that Blazing Soul talent in Shadowlands, you got an extra barrier when you blink, so Blizzard decided to nerf Blazing Barrier from Fire Mage, and the nerf is still in, even though Blazing Soul doesn't exist. So Fire is actually the squishiest of the 3 mage specs because of that reason. It might be an oversight from Blizzard. Blizzard, if you're listening, you could probably unnerf that now since Blazing Soul doesn't exist. But since it's so squishy, it has less mobility than Arcane. The burst is pretty good. And I think Sub Rogue Fire Mage can do pretty well in Arena, especially the Holy Priest. So it's not like it's terrible. It's just like when you play Arena, you'll probably understand what I'm talking about. We have Asa Rogue. Asa Rogue, definitely S tier. Asa is very strong, high DPS, has the kidney shots, has the blinds, has the saps, cheap shots, garrotes, just insane damage. I would expect it to get nerfed in an upcoming patch. Next, we got the Frost Mage. Frost, we have probably somewhere in B tier. So Arcane being the best, Frost probably somewhere in the middle, and then Fire right below that. Frost lends itself well to comps with like a Warlock or a Shadow Priest, more like caster cleave compositions. And I think Frost has a lot of slows, a lot of high consistent pressure, maybe not as much burst. Still can burst very heavily with Glacial Spike, but the strength of Frost is that you can just throw Blizzard, throw Orb, and let your Warlock go to town, keep everything under control. So I think it's a little better than Fire, a little worse than Arcane. Aflock, I would put in A tier. Very strong spec, but not quite as strong as Demo. So Demo's in that S tier. I don't think this comes as a surprise to anyone. The pets are just super overtuned, doing so much damage. They're also like invincible. They like cannot die. They're the tankiest of the 3 Warlock specs. Affliction is doing the most damage in the game, but I think it's a little squishier. It can die, and there's a little less annoying control from like the pets, the pet stuns, the pet kicks, stuff like that from the Aflock than the Demo lock. So overall, it's put Af a little bit worse, but still very good. Man, that Demonology lock, I guarantee it's gonna get nerfed too, man. There's just no way. Destro, I'd probably put in B tier. I'd say Destro is pretty good. Once again, the lock specs probably Demo, Af, Destro. I think Frost Destro makes a pretty solid comp. It might not be like the top of the meta, but I think it could do pretty well. Lots of pairings with that Destro lock. You could play Destro Shadow Priest and probably do pretty well. Destro Arcane probably do pretty well. Double caster stuff would probably do pretty decently. Now, Outlaw Rogue, this might come to a surprise to some of you guys, but I'm going to put Outlaw in either A or S tier. Now, if you look at the representations of a lot of specializations, Outlaw is actually very low. Having said that, I think Outlaw is one of those sleeper OP specs. I know a couple Outlaw Rogues, namely Naj, Nesper, maybe one other one that I've fought that have been playing a lot of Outlaw, and it's, I would say, almost as good as Asa. So let's put it in A tier. Very strong spec. I expect Asa to get nerfed in a coming patch or two, and then Outlaw might be the best spec once Asa gets nerfed, which will be interesting to say the least. Now, Elemental Shaman is super strong. I kind of want to put in S, but let's call it A. I'd say it's more similar to the strength of like an Arcane Mage. Very strong. Maybe not as strong as like a Demo, Asa, or S Priest, but could be considered that strong. Hard to say. Ellie Shamans have incredible burst right now. They just get one shot. Which will probably, the one shot will probably get tuned down, and then they might get buffs in other areas to compensate. We have Fury Warriors. I'd call Fury pretty darn good, even post-nerf from a couple days ago. People like to freak out thinking, oh, my class is dead, my class is dead. But I don't think Fury is that bad after the nerfs. I actually would call it one of the upper classes. Despite the nerfs, their healing is still high. The damage is ridiculous. I'd call it A tier. Death Knights. We have Frost. I'd say underperforming just a little bit in terms of overall damage. Unholy is still insane after the nerfs, and once again, a lot of Death Knights freaking out, knee-jerking. Oh man, the healing nerfs, this is crazy. But no, Unholy is still crazy, man. So good. Actually, I played 3s yesterday and the day before, and most of our matchups were fighting like DK Demo, right? A lot of matchups like DK Shadow Priest, DK Demo, a lot of DKs in the metagame. Demon Hunters, despite the nerfs, very strong. Maybe could be S tier, maybe A. Hard to say. Once again, like a lot of these could be like this or like this, right? Like moved up or down one. Let's call Demon Hunters like top of A tier. You could also put them like bottom of S tier. If we're gonna actually do a more proper ranking, I'd say Demo's here, Shadow Priest, and then yeah, either way, it could be like here or here, right? Very good. Hard to say where that would actually land. So let's call it top of A tier. Marksmanship Hunters, very solid. Unfortunately, double tap nerfs are gonna be, I shouldn't say nerfs, removal of double tap is coming next patch, so we'll have to see what happens then. But Marksmanship Hunters right now are just doing insane damage. And the thing about marks is it's hard to catch them because they're just so, the feint death, freedoms, they just stay a million yards away every time you run at them. They kill you through a pillar with rapid fire and you're just dead. So I'd say marks is definitely on top of its game. Having said that, I think survival and BM might be a little worse. Probably both in B tier. They feel good. but maybe not as good as some other specs, right? They feel good every time I queue into them. It's like, oh, that did a lot of damage, a lot of CC, especially in 2s with a Resto Druid Survival Hunter, Resto Druid BM Hunter work very well. But in 3s, you don't see them as much. Moonkin, unfortunately, for my Moonkin friends, I'm gonna put Guardian down in D. Moonkin friends, I'd say is probably the least, like, worst performing spec in the game right now. Having said that, like, even these C tier classes, guys, are playable. I play fire all the time. You know, I hit 2400 in solo shuffle with fire. You know, rank 1, it's possible, right? It's just not as good. I see Frost DKs bursting hard. I see Moonkins doing well. I know Supatis hit 2400 on Moonkin and solo shuffle as well. It's possible. It's just underperforming. So I just want to reiterate that. Next, we have the Arms Warrior. Arms does not feel as strong as Fury. When I queue into it, it's a little squishier than Fury. Having said that, the burst from Arms is still there. The consistent pressure is there. The Mortal Strikes are there. The utility is there. So we're going to call it a B tier spec. Ret, I would say, is in a similar position. It actually feels like it has some pretty high burst, has some great healing, has some great utility. It's not as good as some of these other A tier, definitely S tier specs. Now, we have a lot of healers. Let's do Evoker. Evoker, easy S tier healer. Doesn't really go incredible throughput, great healer. You can use the Tranquility-like ability to do insane HPS while stunned. Just keeps it alive during goes. Great mobility, insane HOTS, doesn't go right? Resto Druid, I would even put a little bit better than the Preservation Evoker. I'd say Resto Druid's the best healer in the game right now. Don't think that comes as much as surprise. Throughput is insane. You have the Cyclones for the control. Mana pretty much never goes either. They're hard to kill. Resto Druids are, in my mind, the top performing healer in the game, second by that Evoker. We have the Devastation Evoker, and it's either going to be like top of C or like bottom of B for that Devastation. I've been playing a decent amount of my Devastation Evoker. I hit about maybe 2100 or something in 3s early season, and it feels good. It feels good. It feels like I do the most damage ever. I almost always top the meters, even into something like Demo Locks. So it does like the most damage world. The issue with it is you can die. You don't have any button to press while stunned, right? Think of like a Moonkin. You can press Skin. Or like you think of a DK, Icebound, Fortitude, Mage, Blink, right? Hunter, you can even like pet stack yourself. Or like a Fury Warrior, you can like pop your heal. Warlocks can, of course, wall for whatever reason. There's certain classes that can't do anything while stunned, like a Rogue or maybe a Demon Hunter, unless they're playing like Auto Blur or something. But most classes can use something while stunned to not die. Evoker's nothing, man. Like, you get stunned if you don't pre-wall it, pre-temp it, you're dead. Feral, I'd say, is very, very good right now. I could have put it in S or like top of A. Put it top of A. Very strong class. Keep in mind, this is relative. So if there was an S plus tier ranking, some of these S tier classes I'd put in the S plus, and then all these A's would be S. So just keep in mind, these are relative rankings. If you're like, oh, that's not A, it's like, well, we could shift everything up one if we had more room. Windwalkers, either put like kind of top of B or bottom of A. Let's call it bottom of A. A lot of classes in the A tier. Windwalkers do probably the most burst in the game. Pretty much. You can kill someone 100 to 0 in 1.0 seconds. It's insane. The problem with Windwalkers is they're relatively squishy. You die, right? You have that karma, but karma breaks like a piece of paper. In my opinion, maybe Blizzard's watching, I don't play a monk, so I'm not even biased towards monks, really. I don't play with a monk, I don't play a monk. I just want every class doing well, so the game is fun. In my opinion, the way to buff monk is to buff karma. Why does karma break in 1 second? Any monk friends out there agree with me? Why is karma breaking when you pop your biggest defensive cooldown in 1 second? It makes no sense. I don't understand it at all. But anyway, I would nerf that Windwalker monk. Or sorry, buff the Windwalker monk karma to sustain a lot more damage, like maybe double or triple. Like, you shouldn't be able to break a karma unless you have like, I'm trying to think, like Fire Mage, Combust, Meteor, Asarogue, you know, Deathmark. Like, yeah, that should break it. But there should be consequences. You should take a lot of damage in return. Anyway, I think karma needs a buff. And with that, maybe the damage nerfs a little bit so they don't one-shot quite as hard. And I think overall it'd be a better class. Resto Shaman, I think, is a little worse than that Resto Druid, a little worse than the Preservation Evoker, but fairly strong healer overall. I'd say HPAL is not doing too bad. It actually does decently in solo shuffle, because in solo shuffle you have the bubbles, the bops, the sacks, the blinds, like Hajj. You have actually a lot of hard outs, which does very well in solo shuffle. So in solo shuffle, I'd actually put Pally, like really, like Holy Pally does very well in solo shuff. But overall in the game, I would call it a little bit worse than some other specs. It does go once you're out of those outs, you're just and you just end up losing, whereas our Archroot or Preservation Evoker can heal forever. Mistweaver Monk, I think, is a bit better than the Arsham, or very similar to the Arsham, better than the HPAL. Mistweaver Monks have very good throughput. The mana is not quite as good as these two healers up here, but it's still better than like HPAL. And it's definitely better than the Holy Priest throughput. Holy Priest still does very well. It lends itself well to RMP, surprise, surprise. But the Holy Priest does go very quickly. So if you don't win in a few minutes, you auto lose, which is rough. I'd say H Priest and H Pal are in a similar position here. Let's put the H Priest here. Maybe a bit better than the H Pal, maybe a bit worse than the Arsham or the Mistweaver. And Disc, I would say, is very similar. Maybe a little better in some comps, maybe a little worse than others. The Disc Priest does not go as fast as the Holy Priest, which is nice, but the Disc Priest struggles with control. It doesn't have a Chastise, doesn't have a Paralysis like the Monk, it doesn't have the Hammer of Justice. You just have the Fear, but to get the Fear takes setup. So we have some weakness there with the Disc Priest. Last but not least, we have the Enhanced Shaman. Enhanced Shaman seemed insane on the beta. I haven't seen many of them on live servers quite yet. I think we're going to call this around a B tier class. They could be really sleeper and no one knows. I'll probably call them similar to Rets, maybe a little bit worse than Rets. Put it at the end of B. Boom. Tier list done. This is probably fairly accurate right now. Keep in mind, these are relative rankings. So one could go up, one could go down, one could go left or right. Well, yeah, left or right. If we're going to do like an actual tier list, you know, like further left is stronger, further right is weaker. Hope this helps, guys. If you're just coming back to the game, I want to reiterate, all right, don't play what is strong necessarily unless you like the class and think it's fun. If you've never played the class, try it out. Watch a streamer, watch a YouTube video, right? See if it looks fun to you. If it looks fun, roll it, because next patch, something like Demo Lock could go from S to D, right? Guys, thanks for watching. Make sure to hit the subscribe button. We'll catch you in the next video. Peace.